Those of you familiar with the Census Bureau, you know that you can own property only in one location.
Well, you can own property in many locations, but you only live in one of them.
That's right. That's what I meant. Live only in one place, but you can own properties everywhere. Here we talk in the Mishnah about a situation that the person can make an eruv only in one place, meaning he can, which we call knot shvita, he is dwell only in one location, but there are situations, as we discussed in the previous Mishnayot, in the previous Brayot or two, that the person can put some assumption. If you remember the story of the taxes, so he put an assumption that they can come from the east and you run to the west and vice versa. So here in the Mishnah we ask situations as follows. If they have a part of the day is in the east, another part is in the west, but he made his place of dwelling in one location. So the question is, if it's an attachment between Shabbat and Yom Tov, which is, let's say, if the Yom Tov, the festival is Friday, and then following Shabbat, or vice versa, or if you have Shabbat and the following Sunday is a festival, do you consider that as a one long day, and therefore you can make your place of dwelling only toward one location, or it's considering two separate entities, which is the festival is one entity and Shabbat is another one, and therefore you can go and make two different Eiruvin in two different locations, and one apply only to each and every day. Rambam, Hilchot Eruvin, chapter 8, said as follows: כשם שאסור לצאת חוץ לתחום בשבת, כך אסור לצאת לתחום ביום טוב. The same way that we are forbidden to go from one location out of the domain on Shabbat, the same apply to festival. ומערבין עירובי תחומים לימים טובים כדרך שמערבים לשבת. In that sense, it's come to making an Eruv תחומים, is no differentiation between Shabbat and festival, and the way that we make the Eruv apply to both situations. So now we go with the Mishnah. The Mishnah said as follows: Rabbi Eliezer אומר, יום טוב הסמוך לשבת, בין מלפניה בין מלאחריה, מערב האדם שני עירובין. Rabbi Eliezer said, if you have an attachment between festival and Shabbat, regardless if the festival happened on Friday or the following day on Sunday, if a person wants to go out of his domain on Sunday toward one location and Monday to the other location, so he can make מערב אדם שני תחומים, he should make two separate, שני עירובין, two separate עירובין, and he said as follow, ואומר עירובי בראשון למזרח, the first עירוב תחומין that he made should make to the east. So therefore at this time, which is the time of twilight, it will be a retroactive designation for the following day, which means the following day it will take place. ובשני, and now the second day, למערב, it should go to the west part, which means again you put this eruv and you make the declaration, retroactive declaration. Or we go the opposite way, בראשון למערב ובשני למזרח, which means making this eruv apply only to the west part, and it will take part for today for the purpose of tomorrow, and the second one is to the east. So what we try to establish here by Rabbi Eliezer, like two separate Eruvim, even he has a place of residence in one location, but he can make two separate Eruvim that goes to two different locations. So now he said, Eruvi barishon. So basically now we can go each way for 2,000 cubit. So he said, if I make this Eruv for the first day, which means for the purpose of the first day, ubasheni kebneiri, and the second day when he makes his declaration, it's applied to my entire city, which means what happened to everybody else? No one else make an Eruv in the city. So it means he put in his declaration the second day he is just another resident of that city, as there's no difference between him and everyone else. So since the Eruv of the first day will not take place to the second day, So therefore, the second day he's the same as everyone else. Otherwise, if you go the opposite way, he can extend it up to 4,000 cubit, Rashi said. So he go and he said, Ubasheni kibnei Eruvi basheni. If I make the Eruv of the twilight goes to the second day, Ubarishon kibnei, in the first day I'll be the same as all my city. So, which means that is a 2,000 cubit to each direction. Rabbi Eliezer hold that when it's come to Shabbat and festival, that it's attached to each other. It's basically two separate entities, two separate holy day, and therefore each and every day has a idea, a notion of a shvita, of dwelling independently, and you cannot differentiate between the two in which way you wish to. It has to be two separate entities. The sages disagree of Rabbi Eliezer, and they said no, it's all considering as one day, which means, take as example just for understanding, let's think Rosh Hashanah. As you know, worldwide, makes no difference if you are in diaspora or in Eretz Israel. When it's come to observing of Rosh Hashanah, Gemara tells us that Rosh Hashanah is Kedusha Achad, is they carry one entities. We cannot say that the first day or the second day carries more Kedusha than the other days. It's all one entity. So here, just for the sake of understanding, the sages tells us that it's considering one long day. The festival in Shabbat is one long one, and each of them doesn't have the entities of Shvita independently, and therefore a person cannot make an Eruv each day to different direction. Or me'arev leruach echad, or eno me'arev kol ikar. Either we make to one direction for both days, or he doesn't bother to do it at all. So here you see that it's not only that you cannot make, Rashi said, the shvita, the dwelling in one place. It's you cannot make a dwelling to one day alone. Let's read just a little bit Rashi. Eruvi barishon ubasheni kibnei iri. This is a Rashi that it's on about, what is it, 9 lines from the top of the page. כלומר, ואם לא היה רוצה ללך אלא באחד מן הצדדים ביום ראשון ובשני, אין צריך לזוז במקומו. So in my book, ביורה, כלומר ברש"י על הש"ס, I elaborate on this Rashi. So Rashi here asks a question, and that's the reason why I think he needs to use the word klomar. He says, so what's the difference with all of this declaration? If he's part of the city, he's inhabitants of the city, he's one of the residents, and why you need to make Eruv? He's just one of them, and he's not taking any.
He's not traveling.
He's not traveling. Mm-hmm. So in the language that he used here, it says that Basheni Lamarav. So there are several directions I try to say here. Either Rashi tried to say, to explain after Klomar, he tried to say that it's like two separate Eiruvin. One, it's one of the direction, and a second is like the people in the city. And or he used the Hebrew word bet, which means everything starts with bet. Eiruvi, my Eiruv, the first one, Lamizrach, Uba, the bet, Sheni, Lamarav, Ba, Rishon, Lamarav, Ba, Sheni, Lamizrach, Eiruvi, Ba, Rishon, Kivnei. So use this, try to say that it's basically the whole purpose of the discussion is applied to the second day. That he is make a declaration retroactively. I elaborate on this Rashi a lot. If you have the time, please take your time and read the explanation. Now,
so it's, just so I understand, so like for in the example of Rosh Hashanah, where both days are considered essentially one day, one long day. So then you can, so clearly then you can only have one Eruv because it's just
definitely
just for one day because it's considered like one day.
But here is the opinion of the sages. He said, "O me'arev lishnei yamim, o eno me'arev kol ikar." Either he establishes an Eruv for the 2 days, or he establishes no Eruv at all. So later the Gemara asks, it looks like the sages repeat themselves, and they explain what's the purpose of that. Keitzad yaseh. Now we talk about a practical matter. What a person needs to do if he needs to make a Eruv for 2 days. So he said, Morlicho, the agent, brings the Eruv to the location that he wishes to establish, Barishon. So you see here,
just make sure, I'm sorry if I can go back just to make sure I understand. It appears that the sages are saying that if you have Shabbat and Yom Tov consecutively, that's treated as 1 day as well.
Correct.
As in the same way like Rosh Hashanah. So even so Shabbat and a holiday is also 1 day.
Regardless.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we said here, Keitzad Yaseh, what did he do? Molicho barishon u'machshich alav. The agent brings to Eruv, to a location that he wished to establish his residence at the eve of the first day. Venot lo ubalo, which means he take the Eruv in order not to lose it and return before the twilight of the second day, and therefore it only apply to the second, which means the first day it's considering an Eruv, but not the second one. And then he said ve'ochlo, and if he wish he can eat there, umachshich alav, and he go and he stay there with his nightfall until nightfall. Ve'ochlo ubalo, so he eats the Eruv, and then he returned to the place that he was, because Rashi explained he cannot on Shabbat he cannot return the Eruv to his home, and all of that apply when if the festival occurred before Shabbat, which means he take the Eruv to his house on Yom Tov and return to that place that he's dwelling before Shabbat. But if it's a festival consecutively happen on Sunday, so after the Shabbat begins, Rashi said he cannot take in the Eruv. So he leave it there and he return before nightfall, and he check if the Eruv is there. ונמצא מסתכר בהליכתו ומסתכר בעירובו. So he benefits in that he is permitted to walk in a direction that he desires, and his benefit that he is permitted to eat the Eruv. So Rashi said, what does that mean? He is benefit that he is permitted to walk. So Rashi said, Klomar kanalo alicha leyom achar. So I based here my explanation in the book on the book called Piryo Beito. So he said that the whole idea that he rewarded, it's remember that he takes an emissary, take an agent to be his representative. So what does that mean? Mistaker ba'alichato, that he is that he benefits, that in a way that he permitted to walk in the direction that he desires. So he said that it applied to the agent, not only the owner, that he can go and do that in both days. And that's the reason why he used the word here, klomar. And I quote here the Pirush Tiferet Israel. He said as follows: "The imayane ebad eruvo barishon." If he lost the Eruv of the first day, haya mafsid eruvo, he will lose the Eruv. Vegam alichato shebeyom hasheni. Also, the walking was that in vain. The path acher אי אפשר שיערב לשני. He cannot use a different Eruv for the second day. The havelei kemeichim yom tov v'shabbat is like he preparing from festival to Shabbat. So and also בין השמשות השני כשמניח לא יאמר כלום. The second day, whatever he said, it's meaningless. Why? Because כמכין יום טוב ושבת is like preparing from festival to Shabbat. So in general, מסתכר בהליכתו, he benefits. It's a that he is permitted to walk in a direction that he desires. That's what Rashi meant when he used klomar in my very best, that Otherwise, if he leave it there, he may lose the first day, and he lost the kinyan, the foundation of the eruv, the second day, and he lost also the meal. The sages continue and said, "Ne'echal barishon, eruvo larishon." If the eruv was eaten on the first day, so his eruv is effective for the first day, ve'en eruvo lasheni, and his eruv is not effective for the second day. Amar lahem Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer responded to them and he said, Modin atem li shehen shtei kedushot. So you agree with me that Shabbat and festival constitute two distinct sanctity. Why? Because if otherwise, the eruv that went into effect during the twilight at the eve of the first day should have remained in effect for both days, even if it is also eaten on the first day. So, and if you tell me that these are two separate kedushot, so he can make to two different directions, and it looks like according to Rabbi Eliezer, the sages contradicted themselves when it's come to festivals that it's consecutive attached to Shabbat. Because if the person, according to them, put two Eiruvin to two different directions for both days, so it's one Kedusha. So if one Eruv lost in one location, it doesn't apply to the second location. Why? Because there are two. So, but the Gemara go and explain all the meaning here. So the Gemara said, "Leruach achat mai nihu." What's that mean that he puts the Eruv to one direction? It has to be lishnei yamim, to 2 days. Lishnei yamim mai nihu. What does that mean for 2 days? Leruach achat, to one direction. Hainu kamaita. That's exactly what we said earlier. So he said, "Hachi ka'amri Rabbanan Rabbi Eliezer." The sages said to Rabbi Eliezer, "I ata modeh she'en me'arvin yom echad." You agree that you can make the two Eruvin for two different directions to one day, which means a half of the Eruv go to north and one half to the south is impossible. Amar lahem aval. He said, yes, it's true, because you cannot make in two different directions in one day. So then they ask, כשם שמערבים יום אחד, חציו הדרום וחציו הצפון, ככה מערבים בשני ימים, יום המזרח למזרח ויום המערב. So the same way you go north to south in one day, you cannot do in both places. So the same way you cannot go for east and west in one day. So it means, since you tell me that Shabbat and festival is considering as one day, because it's considering a one entity, one kedusha, so the same as you said that in one day he make for one direction to the entire day, or is not bothered to make an Eruv at all. So the same, if it's Yom Tov attached to Shabbat, he make it for the second day one direction, or it doesn't bother to make the Eruv at all. Because Shabbat and festival is considering as one day. Rabbi Eliezer responded and he said, "Hatam kedusha achad, hachashtei kedushot." Over there, when you make two Eruvin to one day, so it's considering one entity, one kedusha. But here in Shabbat attached to Yom Tov, it's two kedushot. So each of them take a place of dwelling independently. You cannot say that it's one entity. So he can put two separate Eruvin, one for Shabbat, one for Yom Tov, and he make his place of dwelling one day, for example, the south, and the other day the north. Now we go and explain, elaborate on this disputation. אמר להם רבי אליעזר, אי אתם מודים לי שמרב ברגליו ביום הראשון. Rabbi Eliezer said that if you agree to me that if it happened that it's a festival attached to Shabbat, that if he doesn't have a food there, he can send an agent to do it on his behalf. So what did he do? He went himself and he sat at the end of the 2,000 cubit until it's dark, and then that's his place of dwelling, and he returned and he went to sleep at his home. מערב ברגליו ביום השני, that he needs to go back to that location the second day, until the second day it's already take hold, and then he cannot go because he went back the first day it doesn't apply to the second day as well. And he said, נאכל עירובו ביום הראשון ואין יוצא עליו ביום השני. So he can go and use the Eruv the first day, but not the second. אמרו לו אבל, they said it's true, היי לי שתי קדושות הן. So it means that it's two separate kedushas, holiday. So it means that if you tell me that it's one kedusha, so one Eruv in the first day hold a permanent for both days. He doesn't need to make Eruv a second time for the second day. So the same way, if you tell me that the Eruv was eaten the first day any place, and it's take hold for the second day, so why you disagree with me if someone make two separate Eruvin, one for Shabbat and one for the festival that are attached to each other, and you hold that you cannot make an Eruv one day for the south, one day for the north? It's two separate Kedushot. V'Rabbanan, the sages that disagree with him, Sapukei Mesapkalo. They have a debate in regard to Shabbat and Yom Tov that it's attached to each other. If it's considering one Kedusha, it's one day, or it's a two separate day. Ve'hacha lechumra, ve'hacha lechumra. So they go and they said in each entities they go stringency, which means since it's not clear, since it's a debate, so they said that you cannot make Eruv to 2 days for two different directions, because maybe it's carry one entities and one Kedusha, and if it's one Kedusha, it's considering this one long day. However, they are stringent because it's not clear, and they said, if you tell me that the first day you can use the Eruv, but not for the second day, so if he went there and he sat there the first day, he needs to do the same the second day, because maybe you hold that Shabbat and the holidays are two separate entities, and it's all that it's two separate days. So the fact that he was there the first day, it doesn't apply to the second day. Amrulo, so the sages say to Rabbi Eliezer, אי אתה מודה שאין מערבין בתחילה מיום טוב לשבת. Don't you concede that one may not establish an Eruv initially on a festival for the Shabbat? Which means, if you have a situation the festival occurred on Friday, and one forget to establish an Eruv on the eve of festival, so he may not establish an Eruv for Shabbat on the festival itself. So Rabbi Eliezer responded to them, Amar lahem, aval, he said, yes, it's true. Hai lae, Kedusha achaten. He said, indeed, he said, it is correct that the 2 days constitute one sanctity. Rabbi Eliezer, Acha mishum achana. Rabbi Eliezer said that you have an issue of a prohibition of preparation on a festival for Shabbat. Because Rabbah, soon you see it, there's a derivative from a pasuk that you cannot use a preparation from one to another. So that's the issue. Tanu Rabbanan, עירב ברגליו ביום ראשון, מערב ברגליו ביום השני. So if one establishes an Eruv with his feet, which means he go to a place what he wished to establish his residence on the eve of the first day, and remain there during the twilight period, so it's Kanash Vita, and then מערב ברגליו ביום השני. So he must nevertheless establish another Eruv in the feet on the eve of the second day. So the same way, נאכל עירובו ביום הראשון. If the Eruv was eaten on the first day, אין יוצא עליו ביום השני. He may not rely to go out beyond the limit permitted the rest of the inhabitants of the town on the second day. דברי רבי. That's the Rebbe, because he said the idea that you're not clear if it's Shabbat or Yom Tov, that consecutive to one another, it's one entity, it's one Kedusha, and it's basically the same as the sages said in the Mishnah. It has to be two Kedushot. So if it's a 2 kedushot, if it's come to the second day, he is like everyone else that didn't prepare an Eruv, and it's only applied to 2,000 cubit in his domain. Rabbi Yehuda said, if the Eruv was eaten on the first day.
Rabbi, sorry to interrupt, but I have just a quick question on the Hebrew. Amar lehen aval, and saying it is true. I'm not sure heard the word aval used in that way before. Usually it means however when I've used it. So.
Well, when I came here, we're talking to people, even very intelligent people, with all the highest degree, and they said, you know, and I don't know, but then as they say, right? I don't know, That's the way they're speaking, right? So sometimes people said, in other languages, something that in a regular manners it's one thing,
right?
But they meant other things.
Gotcha.
Here, in the sense, they use the word aval to tell you, yes, it's a supportive point, it's emet, it's true.
Okay.
Right? Like people in the south, I think, sometimes right, use a certain... Anyway, we are 38b. Harei zeh chamar gamal. So it's like a person in the position of both. He have a donkey driver and the camel driver, which means one lid on the front, one lid on the back. So it means that you don't know if Rashi explained Dilma Chada Kedushai. Maybe it's considering one kedusha. So you don't know which way, if it's a 2,000 amah in one location or not. So רבן שמעון גמליאל ורבי ישמעאל בנו של רבי יוחנן בן ברוקה אומרים ערב ברגליו בראשון, אין מערב ברגליו בשני. If he went there the first day, he doesn't need to go the second. נאכל ערבו ביום ראשון, but if the Eruv was eaten on the first day, יוצא עליו בשני. He may still rely on it and go out behind the limit permitted on the rest of the inhabitants of the town the second day, because the 2 days constitute one sanctity. So therefore the Eruv acquire his place of rest for both days. Omar Rav, halacha k'arba'a zkenim halalu. It's halacha is according to this 4 elder. Ve'aliba di Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar, and this go by according to Rabbi Eliezer that said in the Mishnah that if you have Shabbat and Yom Tov, that one is attached to the other, shtei kedushot hen, that he needs to make 2 Eiruvin to 2 days, one to east and one to west. Ve'elu en arba'a zkenim, and this is the list of the 4 elders: Rabban Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Stimta. Okay, so that's the 4. Ve'ikadei echad minayu, Rabbi Eliezer, it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, umapik Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Stimta. Pull out his name. Rabban Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, ipchash minalo. We basically see the opposite way, that they hold and that it's one kedusha, like the says in the Mishnah, meaning that if one makes the Eruv for the first day, he doesn't need to make it for the second day. So the Gemara said, Eipuch, you have to go opposite, which means Rabban Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Nosh, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka said, if you make the Eruv either ברגליו בראשון, מערב ברגליו בשני, נאכל ערבו ביום ראשון, יוצא עליו בשני, which means that the Shabbat and the festival is 2 separate kedushot. So the Gemara said, Yache Hainu Rebbe. That's the same as Rebbe we said earlier. Ema v'chen amar Rabban Shimon Gamliel, which means that it's like an addition what he said. Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, said if he make the Eruv in his feet the first day, he could go and say the second day. And Rabbi Yehuda said, Harei zeh chamar gamal. V'lichshuv namei Rabbi. The Rabbi also hold that Shabbat and Yom Tov, that's 2 separate entities. Rabbi Tanela velo savarla. Rabbi hold that way but didn't follow, which means Rabbi hold that's the Braita according to the way of Rabbi Elazar, that it's all that if you have a Shabbat and Yom Tov, it's 2 separate kedushot. But he himself doesn't hold that, and he hold that it's one kedusha. It happens sometimes in halacha. You see that that I'll give you a small example. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the previous posek, when it's come to using a soap on Shabbat, so it's a liquid soap he allowed to people outside, but in his household he told them not to do it. So it happens. Rabbanan tanula velo savrela. So now the Gemara asks, how Rav know that Rabban Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka hold the same as Rabbi Eliezer? Maybe they follow, they say according to Rabbi Eliezer, but doesn't hold that way. So they say Rav Gemara Gamirla. Rav received it from his teacher that his four elder hold the same as Rabbi Eliezer. The Rebbe doesn't hold that way, which means that only hold according to Rabbi Eliezer. Now, since we talk about halachot that come from Rav, we try to prove that there are several contradictions between those halachot. Kinach nafshei de Ravuna ayil Rav Chizda lememra de Rava de Rav. So when Ravuna passed away, Rav Chizda came and he raised an objection. So the Maharatz Chayot explained that it was some strain between the two, and therefore Rav Chizda departed and didn't see each other. Only after his passing, he came back and he raised some objections. So he said, Mi amar Rav halacha karba zkenim v'liba de Rabbi Eliezer. Did Rav say that halacha is follow these four elders? The Amar, and according to Rabbi Eliezer, that he said that if you have Shabbat and festival one attached to another, shtei kedushot, and it's considering two separate entities. Ve'ha'itmar Shabbat v'Yom Tov. We learn that if you have Yom Tov and Shabbat, one it's on Friday, one Sunday. Rav Amar nolda beze asura beze. We talk in Tractate Beya in Beitzah that was born in one day, and if it's attached for Shabbat and Yom Tov, so it's forbidden to. So basically, the whole idea is eaten cannot go for the second day. So if you go by that way, the only prohibition is applied to one day and not to the following. So why they're forbidden the second day? It's like Rav contradicted himself. In one hand, he said that when it's come to Beya, was born, so he said Shabbat and Yom Tov, it's considering one Kedusha. And it's come to Eruv Tchumin, he said that these are two separate Kedushot. Amarabba hatam mishum achana. The idea is that you have issue of achana, that you're preparing. You cannot eat and Yom Tov food that was prepared the previous day, which was Shabbat. Because they said, the Tanya, they said in Shmot, in Exodus chapter 16, V'haya bayom hashishi v'echinu et asher yaviu. The Torah said that when the manna came, so they need to have a preparation on Friday for the purpose of Shabbat, which means you don't do that on Shabbat. You don't go out and collect manna on Shabbat. You need to go on Friday and collect it for Shabbat, which means that it's a double portion that goes for both days. So usual Friday is what? It's a secular regular day. It's not a festival. But Tosfot here brought the Midrash, and he said, שלא ירד מן לישראל בשבתות והם טובים, ויש מדרשים חלוקים, דרשן ויברך ויקדש ברחוב מן וקדשו מן, ובאמת קדושה ברכתו מכל יום וקדשתו מכל הזמנים, משמע ירד מן ביום טוב. ולפי זה צריך לומר, דשי משמע המבורר, דהיינו חול כמו הירך המיומן שבערך. So Tosfot here I have some distinction over Friday. But anyway, the way that we understand here, that חול מכין לשבת, וחול מכין ליום טוב, which means only when it occurred on a regular secular day, can do a preparation for the following day, which is Shabbat or Yom Tov. Ve'en Yom Tov mechin leShabbat, ve'en Shabbat mechina liyom Tov. But you cannot have a preparation for festival to Shabbat and not Shabbat for festival, which means that all these meals, Rashi said, that you prepare for the holy days has to be prepared in advance in a regular day, which means even we talk about manna. Manna, it's like something that prepared from heaven. Yet, if it's prepared in a way before, and it's like day before, so you have you have the same kedusha. So if you have 2 consecutive days, has to be prepared in advance. That's the way that Rashi explained. So what we basically derive from this pasuk, 2 separate prohibitions. One, when we talk about the first day, even prepared by itself naturally, if it's forbidden to eating on the first day, it's also applied to the second day, if it's consecutive day. Second, that you cannot prepare for the first day to the second day, that if he has Eruv for the first day, he cannot make for the following day, which called hachana, preparations. Most of the poskim hold that it's hachana, the preparation is biblical. Rambam hold that it's only rabbinic. Now, Amar le Abaye. Abaye asked Rabbah the following question: Ela hadetnan, what we learn in the previous Mishnah in regard to festival that occurred on Friday. Keitzadu ose. Remember we said that the agent Molicho Barishon, he sent it on the eve of Yom Tov before Shabbat, umachshich alav. So he wait for the night that it takes a permanent dwelling. Venotlo ubalo. So he pulled out the eruv and returned. Basheni machshich alav v'ochlo ubalo. So the second he can do the same and eat and return. So haka mechin miyom tov leShabbat is like preparing from festival to Shabbat. אמר לרבה, מי סבר סוף היום קונה עירוב? תחילת היום קונה עירוב, ושבת מכינה לעצמה. Do you hold that Shabbat it's making the Shvita in advance? It's like Yom Tov preparing for Shabbat. The whole idea of Eruv, it's the end of the twilight time, which means that if Yom Tov occurred before Shabbat, the making a permanent residence, it's only in the Shabbat itself, and not in a festival. And the Shabbat, in that sense, is mechina la'atzma. Shabbat, it's like independent preparation. So here you see that would like to read a little bit from the Chaye Adam, from the one of the book of Code. He said as follows. I try to translate his word. He said, אין איסור הכנה רק אם הדבר נגמר מוכן לצורך שבת. The only prohibition of preparations, it's apply from Shabbat to festival, from festival to Shabbat, but from Shabbat to Shabbat itself, or Yom Tov to Yom Tov itself, it's not an issue. Why? He said שקניין העירוב חל בתחילת יום השבת, that the whole idea of making this acquirement of the Eruv apply before Shabbat. So the Shabbat, it's like preparing itself by itself, and the Kinyan, the whole idea of acquirement, it's not one of those prohibition of preparation. So basically carrying from one location to another, it's not prohibited because of the hachana. Can say other reason, but not because of preparations. That's the Chaye Adam. So if you tell me that the Eruv apply before the Shabbat begins, Ela me'ata, now you tell me that there's a twilight time, the Eruv take place, Ye'arvu belagin. Ela me'ata ye'arvu belagin. So if you have a bottle of wine, and you have the first tithe, and it was basically since you didn't take the tithe, it's still considering tevel, and so what you said? You said, let this wine in this bottle be teruma of the tide for the wine in the barrel, not only after the nightfall. So basically, if you say that, an Eruv acquires one's residence at the beginning of the day. So the question is, why was it determined that wine may not establish an Eruv with such a wine? So they said, Be'inan Seuda Ruya mi be'od yom veleika. We require a meal that fit to be eaten while it's still day, and here it's not. Remember, one of the core points is that you have to be a meal at the time that you prepared it, and here the wine in the bottle remains stable, and therefore it's if it's stable, it's unfit for drinking until the nightfall. Ela hadetnan, what we learn in the Mishnah in 38, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yom Tov v'samur Shabbat ben lefanei ben nachei amar Adam shnei tchumin. The person, if regardless, he should make two separate eruv. But don't we require a meal that was fit to be eaten while it's still day, and here is none? So since one established an eruv in one direction for the first day, he can only travel within 2,000 cubit radius of that location. So therefore, if he established his eruv for the second day in the opposite direction, he cannot access that eruv during the first day. So the Gemara, the Rabbi responded and said, "Mi savart, do you think that we are dealing with the case the manachle besof hamayim amalekhan besof hamayim amalekhan, that he placed an eruv in the further possible spot at the end of the 2,000 cubits in this direction, and he placed the other one in 2,000 cubits in that direction." Lo, the manachle besof elef amalekhan besof elef amalekhan. No, in the case they place an eruv at the end of 1,000 cubits in one direction, and they put the eruv in the other 1,000 direction. So even after acquiring his resident on this side of the town by means of the first eruv, he can still go to the spot where he left the other eruv for the second day. אלא had אמר רב יהודה מערב ברגליו יום ראשון מערב ברגליו יום שני רבע פד יום ראשון מערב פד יום שני הקא מכין מיום טוב לשבת. Basically is preparing for festival on Shabbat. אמר לי מי סבר דאזל ואמר מידי? Do you think that he must go and say something that at the side of the eruv? So דאזל ושתק ויתב, he sat there and silently, and he sit and automatically, without any sense, its speech is not considering an action. So even one to say that is establishing an eruv, why you need to say a statement? So it's not fall into a category of the prohibited preparation. So it's just quiet. Keman, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Amar Chavtzei Ker Konin Shvita. You go by Rabbi Yochanan, said a sleeping person acquires a Shabbat residence in a spot where he is sleeping, even though he is comparable to ownerless property. So he said ownerless property itself acquires Shabbat residence and his own Shabbat boundaries, and there is no need for a person to establish a residence for it in the particular spot. So he said, "Afilu Taima Rabbanan." Even, by the way, the Tosfot here said that it means that he wants to be part of all the inhabitants of the city, and that's the reason we use it. Anyway, Afilu Taima Rabbanan. Even you tell me that this is applied to the sages that disagree with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in regard to someone sleeping outside of the Tchum Shabbat, and they said it's only 4 cubits. They said that if someone is walking to that location, he doesn't need to say a statement, and it's not a question. Ad kan lo plig Rabbanan alei Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The sages not disagree with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Ela biyashen. It's only apply to someone in a state of sleeping person. Why? The lo matzeh amar, who cannot say anything. Aval beneor. Nowadays you see many people talking while they're sleeping, right? But however, I'm just joking. But aval beneor, however, with regard to one who's awake, that if he wanted to speak, he could speak, even though that he did not say that he is acquiring his Shabbat residence, he is considered as one who did say that statement. If you hear what we told, the following Braita, so he said here that the person may not walk at the end of his field on Shabbat to determine what work or repair requires. So imagine if you have a construction business or something like that. So you go there and you watch and you figure out on Shabbat what needs to be done after Shabbat. So the Rambam said in Hilchot Shabbat as follows, chapter 24. יש דברים שהם אסורים בשבת, אף על פי שאינם דומים למלאכה. There are certain things that it's forbidden on Shabbat, even it's not the same as doing some type of work. ואינם מביאים לידי מלאכה, and it's not bringing a person to do some work. ומפני מה נאסרו, so why are we forbidden it? Because they said in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, אם תשיב משבת רגליך, that is statement we said before the Kiddush on Shabbat morning, if תשיב משבת רגליך, עשות חפציך ביום קודשי, that you should avoid it from doing things that looks inappropriate for the spirit on Shabbat. ונאמר וכיבדתו מעשות דרכיך מצווך צריכה לדבר דבר. So it means that there is a certain decorum, certain behavior that apply to Shabbat. So therefore, אסור לאדם להלך בחפציו בשבת אפילו לדבר בהם. Which means a person cannot go on Shabbat and do all kind of business actions even indirectly, such as כגון שידבר עם שותפו מה ימכור למחר. You go to your partner and talk, it's not Sunday yet or Monday, but let's make some business deals that we make the contract on, or you make that happen on this following day. Or מה יקנה, או איך יבנה, what should require, what should build. buy את זה, סחורה ילך למקום פנני, what merchandise you should buy, sell, כל זה כעושה בו אסור. All of that is prohibited, שנאמר ודבר דבר. You should not allow to speak about it. דיבור אסור הוא מותר אסור. Basically thinking about it, if you think about it. But to have a discussion with someone over that, it's prohibited on Shabbat because it's not appropriate, it's incongruous for the spirit of Shabbat. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 4:16. One may establish 2 Eiruvin on the eve of festival that attached to Shabbat and stipulate that his Eruv should apply to one day or both, to one direction or two. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. If one establishes an Eruv by foot on a festival that next to Shabbat, he may establish an Eruv by foot on the second day as well. However, if he made an Eruv with food and the food was eaten, he may not establish an Eruv the following day with different food, since it's prohibited to prepare from festival to Shabbat and vice versa. Two sanctity, a festival and Shabbat are considered 2 distinct sanctities with regard to Eiruvin. So if a festival and Shabbat occurred on the consecutive days, an egg laid on one is prohibited to the other, to the rabbinic prohibition against hachana, against preparation. If one wishes to establish 2 Eiruvin for 2 days in different directions, he may not separate them by more than the distance which will allow him to reach on the first day an Eruv be prepared for the second day. We said that also one who deposits an Eruv on a festival for Shabbat should not go to the spot and declare that he is going to acquire a place of rest. So the Magen Avraham said in 4:16, he should sit there and remain silent and is not speak, and the Eruv is still valid. The last halacha, it's very important halacha, listen to this, is Magen Avraham Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 3:06. Lo yehalech adam lesof sadeu. It is prohibited to walk in one's fields on Shabbat for the purpose of determining what they will acquire after Shabbat. So this rule only applies when it's evident that this is one's intention. So we explain also the Rambam that tells us in Hilchot Shabbat 24 that anything that is not appropriate for the Decorum of Shabbat, the person should not discuss. So partnership, business requirement, etc., building, constructions, he can think, but discussing it, it's inappropriate for the spirit of Shabbat.
Kare tu